Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Paranormal Lens. I am Jamie Widener, your host for this evening, along with my co-host, Chad Thomas. Chad, what's
Hello,
going
everybody. Oh, busy week. Busy week. We had a great time last night. We were on a podcast, Jamie.
We stayed
2
up
nights
late.
in a row. But we were on somebody else's podcast. That was a different experience, and it was a great experience.
It really was a lot of fun. Thanks to Entity Voices Paranormal Evidence for having us last night. Ron Iacovetti, Cherie, and Tony Rathman were all with us, or we were with them, I should say. I'm so used to hosting stuff. Like, it's weird to say we were there instead of they were here. Although they both have been here with
Jim.
Ron and Tony. We miss Chris, Audra, and Lourdes, unfortunately, but hopefully next time, it'll be next time. So, but yeah, what a lot of fun. Just really great to talk with, other people in the field. Anytime you get to do that, it's always a good engagement. And just so much fun. And they're cool people, and they do great work. And, Staticom is such an interesting and dynamic thing that we're looking forward to seeing them in a couple of weeks, actually. So,
Yep. Yeah. But it was so weird being on the guest side of it because it was like, wait,
it was great.
I don't have to worry about this. So, and thanks to everybody who watched us there. I think it was was the first time for some people seeing their show. I do recommend it. They do a great job. They have a couple different formats. They're trying something new, but they brought us on just to start to talk. We did a little bit of evidence reveal, but that's what their key thing has been over the years. But they want to get into some more talk and discussion and moderation and panel discussions and things like that. So anyway, it was fun.
Yeah, and thanks, Todd. This is absolutely true. It was weird. It was weird being a guest. It's strange, not weird. Strange, but it was cool. So.
So thank you again. Thank you.
Before we get too far, welcome Jim, Albert, Bert. Sorry, Habit. I'm reading. Todd, Carmela, Heather's here. So guys, thanks for coming along. We hope not to disappoint after our fun last night. So, wow. It's funny because we get done with this. It's 10 o'clock Eastern time. On a Tuesday night. There's really nothing on TV. There's never anything good on TV anymore anyway, other than us. So this is where it should be at 9 o'clock, no matter what. But, I was so, afterwards, I don't think I fell asleep till well after midnight. And, normally I can just go kind of get there. But, after these episodes, it's usually like that because it's such a great energy having guests, like the people who are engaging with us. I'll call them guests. Even when we have a guest, it's the same thing. You just pick up so much energy and the interest level, it just spikes your endorphins. You kind of get going. The problem is the alarm still goes off at, dark early in the morning, regardless. Right. But it's a loss I'm willing to take.
Yeah, definitely.
Because this all is a lot of fun. And thank you all for joining us. And I probably should stop babbling and start getting towards the topic. Right. But,
probably, but that's okay.
Probably. Really, come on. So I'm your host tonight, and that means it's my subject. I've been thinking about this episode for a while, and I want to give you all a confession. First of all, I've been looking at the Dyatlov Pass incident or mystery for a long time, and I've been aware of it for a long time, and it is such a thing, and I'm sure once you may not know it by name, but once I start talking about it, I'm sure you'll recognize it. It is a very old tale. It actually happened back in February of 1959 when Chad was 4 years old.
Wait a minute. That makes you older than that, Jamie.
5. All right, shut up. I shouldn't have said that. A bit older. But it is very old in that sense, in the sense of exponential. Time has gone by. And 2, it happened in Soviet Russia. And this was truly Soviet Russia at the time. Mm-hmm. So the USSR as it was. And it didn't get out for quite a while, to us in the Western world. So some of it, and it was documented, and some of the, I'm going to be honest with you, some of the documentation in this situation is pretty gruesome. And I'm not going to show you that stuff. There's no need to. I think the tale will tell you what happened. But it is a situation where a lot of hikers, skiers went out on an expedition and didn't come home. And the mystery is what happened to them that caused them not to come back, because it is kind of wacky. So I am going to, instead of coming up with all of this stuff, because there are sources all over the place, I landed on an article from the New Yorker magazine from back in 2021. And I'm going to give full credit to this article. So I'm just going to read it to you because I think it's probably the best thing I could have. It's better than anything I could have made for you. It was written by a guy named Douglas Preston, again, from May 21st edition of the New Yorker magazine. So it's out there in print. You can find this yourself, kind of thing. And honestly, I think I might like to find it and have a copy of it because it's pretty cool. So first of all, like we always start with the where, right? Where in the world are we? So and I'm losing my slide. I apologize for looking sideways. I have two monitors now. Finally, I'm like, welcome to the real world. In front of me, and I have, there it is, the slider over here. So we are talking about Soviet Russia, and we are talking about the western side of the Ural Mountains. And those who play Risk know where Ural is, right? Middle of nowhere in Russia. But what's interesting about the mountain range, and it runs pretty much the entire spine of Russia, like up through from the north to south to north to south. I guess it goes both ways, right? But it is the separation between Europe and Asia. So when you're on the western side, you're still considered to still be in Europe. You cross over to the western side, you're considered to be in Asia. And that is at the beginning of Siberia, which under the Soviet regime, people were sent to Siberia to prison camps and labor camps and such. Dissidents were sent away and really never came back. So it is a wide land of not a lot of places there. And really, honestly, it still isn't. If I were to drill this map down, there are now communities. I wouldn't call them cities. I would call them towns or villages. So even still, all these years later, 65 years later, it is still a largely unpopulated area. Kind of like when we talked about Alaska, how it's like, only so many people per square mile. It's actually less. I think it's like 3 people per square mile in this region. So, everybody lives in hamlets or villages or towns. And there are now roads when there weren't before too. So modernization has occurred, but it is still pretty about space. So, and the when is February 1st and February 2nd of 1959. So the dead of winter, right? And the dead of winter in a place where it's already cold is get out. So here's the story. And again, Dyatlov Pass, right? So Igor Dyatlov was a tinkerer, an inventor, and a devotee to the wilderness. Born in 1936 near Servazlak, near what is now called Yekaterinburg, he built radios as a kid and loved camping. When the Soviet Union launched Sputnik in 1957, he constructed a telescope so that he and his friends could watch the satellite travel across the night sky. And out there is a big, wide open sky. We've talked about this being in the west of the U.S., away from light pollution. There is no light pollution out here, so the stars are bright and big. One of the leading by then, he was an engineering student at the city's Ural Polytechnic Institute, good old UPI, that fits on a sweatshirt. One of the leading technical universities in the country, UPI turned out top flight engineers to work in the nuclear power and weapons industries, communications, and military engineering. During his years there, Dyatlov led a number of arduous wilderness trips, often using outdoor equipment that he had invented or improved upon. In this time of optimism in the USSR's Khrushchev's fall, had freed many political prisoners from Stalin's Gulag. Again, political prisoners, dissidents that were headed to Siberia. And the economic growth was robust and the standard of living was rising. The shock that the success of Sputnik delivered to the West further bolstered national confidence. By late 1958, Dyatlov began planning a winter expedition that would exemplify the boldness and vigor of a new Soviet generation. An ambitious 16-day cross-country ski trip in the Urals, the north-south mountain range that divides western Russia from Siberia and thus Europe from Asia, as I said. He submitted this proposal to the UPI Sports Club, which apparently he had to get permission to go do this, which readily approved it. Dyatlov's itinerary lay 350 miles north to Sverdlovsk. There's a lot of consonants, not a lot of vowels in that word. There's going to be a lot of this, by the way. Welcome to Russian. In the traditional territory of the Mansi and indigenous peoples. The Mansi came into contact with Russians around the 16th century, when Russia was extending its control over Siberia. Though largely Russified by this time, the Mansi continued to pursue a semi-traditional way of life, hunting, fishing, and reindeer herding. Dyatlov's group would ski 200 miles on a route that no Russian, as far as anyone knew, had taken before. And that's also part of the reason why it was approved, because it was a unique opportunity. Okay. The mountains were gentle and rounded, their barren slopes rising from a vast boreal forest of birch and fir. The challenge wouldn't be rugged terrain, but brutally cold temperatures, deep snow, and high winds. Dyatlov recruited his classmate Zina Kolomogorova and 7 other fellow students and recent graduates. They were among the elite of Soviet youth and all highly experienced winter campers and cross-country skiers. One of Dyatlov's close friends, Grigory Krovinsenko, who had graduated from UPI 2 years before and worked as an engineer at the nearby Mayak nuclear complex in the then secret town of Chelyabinsk 40. And a lot of this has to, and when you see numbers after stuff, or I repeat numbers after stuff, it talks about its elevation, which I think is really interesting that they do. So it's a lowland facility, a lowland town. He was jug-eared, small and wry. He told jokes, sang, and played the mandolin. Sounds like my kind of guy. 2 other recent graduates were Rustem Slobonik and Nikolai Thibault Brignoles, of French descent, whose father had been working nearly to death in one of the Stalin camps. The other students included Yuri Yurdin, Yuri Doroshenko, and Alexander Kolotovlov. The youngest of the group, at 20, was Luinda Dubinina, an economics major, a track athlete, and an ardent communist who wore her long hair in braids, tied with silk ribbons. On a previous winter outing, Dubinina was accidentally shot by a hunter and survived, quite cheerfully, it was said, during a 50-mile journey back to civilization. So again, this is the middle of nowhere. Something happens to you. Mm-hmm. She's lucky to be alive. Well, and
I've heard another story on her. Uh-huh. She refused to give her pack to somebody else to carry back. She carried it on her own the whole way back.
Wow. And that's not surprising.
Yeah.
Right. This was an era of being tough and sturdy and self-sufficient, resilient. Mm-hmm. And the disadvantage in this case, in the era of the 50s and 60s, being a woman, you need to prove yourself, especially in this era of the Soviets. So a couple days before the group was due to set off, the UPI administration unexpectedly added a new member, much older than the others and largely unknown to them. His name was Semyon Zolotaryov, a 37-year-old veteran of the Second World War with an old-fashioned mustache, stainless steel crowns in his teeth, and tattoos. So he did not look like the clean-cut kind of athletic guy or girl even of the rest of the group. The party left Sverdlovsk by train on January 23rd. Several of them hid under seats to avoid buying tickets. Sounds like something we would do, right? Yeah, especially in the 20s. They were in high spirits, so high that on a layover between trains, Krovinchenko was briefly detained by police for playing his mandolin and pretending to panhandle in the train station. We know these details because there was a communal journal, and many of the skiers also kept personal journals. At least 5 had cameras, and the pictures they took show a lively and strikingly handsome group of young people having the adventure of their lives, skiing, laughing, playing in the snow, and mugging for the camera. After 2 days on trains, the party reached Ivdel, a remote town from the Stalin-era prison camp that by then held mostly criminals. From there, the group traveled another day by bus, and then in the back of a woodcutter's truck, and finally by ski, guided by a horse-drawn sleigh. They slept in an abandoned logging camp called Second Northern, which is very English. I'm expecting less vowels and more consonants, but there it is, Second Northern. There, Yuri Yudin had a flare-up of sciatica that forced him to pull out of the trip. The next day, January 28th, he turned back, while the remaining 9 set off toward the mountains. The plan was to end up in the tiny village of Visa around February 12th and telegram the UPI Sports Club that they had arrived safely. The expected telegram never came. At first, the UPI Sports Club assumed that the group had just been held up. There had been reports of heavy snowstorms in the mountains, but after several days passed, the families of the group began placing frantic phone calls to the university and to the local bureau of the Communist Party. And on February 20th, a search was launched. There were several search parties, student volunteers from the UPI, prison guards from the Ivdel camp, Mansi hunters, local police, military deployed planes and helicopters even. On February 25th, the students found ski tracks, and the next day they discovered the skiers' tent above the tree line on a remote mountain that the Soviet officials referred to as height 1079 or 1079, and that the Mansi called Kholat Saikal, or, love this name, Chad. Translation, Dead Mountain. Great, right? Mm-hmm. There was no one inside the tent. And even the tent was partially collapsed and largely buried in snow. After digging it out, the search party saw that the tent appeared to have been deliberately slashed in several places. Inside, everything was neat and orderly. The skiers' boots, axes, and other equipment were arranged on either side of the door. Food was laid out as if it was about to be eaten. There was a stack of wood for a heating stove, and clothes, cameras, and journals were there. About 100 feet downhill, the search party found very distinct footprints of 8 or 9 people walking, not running, toward the tree line. Almost all of the prints were of stockinged feet, some even bare. One person appeared to be wearing a single ski boot. Some of the prints indicated that the person was either barefoot or in socks because you could see the toes, the searcher later testified. The party followed the prints downhill for 600 or 700 yards until they vanished near the tree line. The next morning, searchers found the bodies of the mandolin player Kurvashenko and the student Doroshenko under a tall cedar tree at the edge of the forest. They were laying next to a dead fire, wearing only underwear. 12 to 15 feet up the tree were some recently broken branches, and on the trunk bits of skin and torn clothes were found. Later that day, the search party discovered the bodies of Dyatlov and Kolomogorova. Both were further up the slope, facing in the direction of the tent, their fists tightly clenched. They seemed to have been trying to get back there. The 4 bodies were autopsied, while the search for the others continued. The medical examiner noted a number of bizarre features. Krivoshenko had blackened fingers and 3rd-degree burns on the shin and foot. Inside his mouth was a chunk of flesh that he had bitten off his right hand. Doroshenko's body had burned hair on one side of the head and a charred sock. All of the bodies were covered with bruises, abrasions, scratches, and cuts, as was the 5th body, that of the recent graduate Slobodin, which was discovered a few days later. Like Dyatlov and Kolomogorova, Slobodin was on the slope leading back to the tent with a sock on one foot and a felt bootie on the other. His autopsy noted a minor fracture of his skull. Now, a homicide investigation was underway, led by a prosecutor in his mid-30s named Lev Ivanov. Toxicology tests were done, witness testimony taken, diagrams and maps made of the scene, and evidence gathered and forensically analyzed. Forensics in 1959 isn't the CSI we're watching on CBS these days, right? So keep that in mind. The tent and its contents were helicoptered out of the mountains and set up again inside a police station. This led to a key discovery. A seamstress who came to the station to do a uniform fitting happened to notice that the slashes in the tent had been made from the inside. Something had happened that induced the skiers to cut their way out of the tent and flee into the night, into a howling blizzard in 20 below zero temperatures in bare feet or socks. They were not novices into winter mountains. They would have been acutely aware of the fatal consequences of leaving the tent half-dressed in those conditions. This is the central and apparently inexplicable mystery of the incident. 4 bodies remained missing. In early May, when the snow began to melt, a Mansi hunter and his dog came across the remains of a makeshift snow den in the woods, 250 feet from the cedar tree. A floor of branches laid in a deep hole in the snow. Pieces of tattered clothing were strewn about, black cotton sweatpants on the right leg with the right leg cut off, and half of a woman's sweater. Another search team arrived, and using avalanche probes around the den, They brought up a piece of flesh. Excavation uncovered the 4 remaining victims, lying together in a rocky stream bed under at least 10 feet of snow. The autopsies revealed catastrophic injuries to 3 of them. Thibault Brignolle's skull was fractured so severely that pieces of his bone had been driven into his brain. Zolotarov and Dubinina had crushed chests with multiple broken ribs, and the autopsy report noted a massive hemorrhage in the right ventricle of Dubinina's heart. The medical examiner said the damage was similar to what is typically seen as the result of an impact of an automobile moving at high speed. Yet none of the bodies had external penetrating wounds, though Zolotarov's was missing his eyes, and Dubinina's was missing its eyes, tongue, and part of the upper lip. Creepy, right?
Yeah.
So, a careful inventory of clothing recovered from the bodies revealed that some of these victims were wearing clothes taken or cut off the bodies of others, and a laboratory found that several items emitted unnaturally high levels of radiation. A radiological expert testified that because the bodies had been exposed to running water for months, these levels of radiation must have originally been many times greater. On May 28th, Ivanov abruptly closed the investigation. His role was to determine whether a crime had been committed, not to clarify what had happened, and he concluded that homicide was not a factor. Ivanov ended his report with a non-explanation that bedeviled Dyatlov researchers ever since. Quote, "It should be concluded that the cause of the skiers' demise was an overcoming force in which they were not able to overcome." Sounds like government speak, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Well, in classic Soviet style, a number of officials who had little to do with the tragedy were either punished or fired, including the director of the UPI and the chairman of its sports club, the local Communist Party secretary, the chairman of 2 workers' unions, and a union inspector. What they might have had to do with this, who knows? But classic Soviet style there, everybody goes. The investigative files, photographs, and journals were classified, and the area around Dead Mountain was placed off limits to skiers and outdoor enthusiasts for years. The tent was stored, but eventually became moldy and had to be thrown out. The saddle in the mountains, which the skiers were heading for but never reached, was named the Dyatlov Pass. The victims' families were left deeply dissatisfied, as you can imagine. Many of them wrote to officials, including Khrushchev himself, demanding the more thorough investigation, but nothing more was done. The mysterious deaths of the 9 skiers subsided into relative obscurity. However, in 1990, the prosecutor Ivanov, who had retired, published an article in which he claimed that while compiling the 1959 report, he had been pressured not to include his views on what had happened. The article, titled "The Enigma of the Fireballs," said that the skiers had been killed by heat rays or balls of fire associated with UFOs. In his original examination of the scene, Ivanov had found trees with unusual burn marks, which confirmed that some kind of heat ray, say, or a powerful force whose nature is completely unknown, in parentheses to us at least, acted selectively on specific objects, in this case, people. The last photograph in Kurvachenko's camera showed flares, streaks of light against a black background. By then, the official files had been released, and in the decades since, the case has become one of the most celebrated mysteries of the Soviet era. It has generated dozens of books and documentaries, along with a slew of websites and message boards on which Dyatlov obsessives trade scores of theories. The official count of the Russian Prosecutor's General Office lists 75 about what happened. And in the year 2000, no, go to Brian, no, yeah. All right, sorry. In 2000, relatives of the friends of the victims established a Dyatlov Group Memorial Foundation, whose purpose is to honor the memory of the skiers and seek the truth. Its president is Yuri Kuntsev, who, as a 20-year-old boy, attended the funerals of some of the victims. He went on to study and teach at UPI, which has become the Ural State Technical University, and to join its sports club. Now in his mid-70s, he still leads tours to the Dyatlov Pass. Kuntsevic told me, and this is the author speaking, that the Russians generally favor one of the 2 theories. The skiers died because they had stumbled into an area where secret weapons were being tested. Alternatively, the party was killed by mercenaries, probably American spies. Okay. Kuntsevic insists that the first of these theories is the correct one. And it's also what the families tend to believe. The idea is that the missile launch was something went disastrously wrong, inflicting severe injuries on some of the skiers and forcing the group to flee their tent, at which point they either froze to death or were killed by military observers. Yuri Yudin, whose sciatica compelled him to abandon the trip, likewise maintained that the deaths were not natural. Not long before he died, in 2013, he declared that his teammates had been taken from the tent at gunpoint and murdered. Dubinina, he said, may have had her tongue cut out by the killers because she was the most outspoken of the group. Proponents of the weapon test theory cite claims that from people in the region that they had seen flashes of light or moving balls of fire in the direction of the mountains. In 2008, a 3-foot-long piece of metal was found in the area. According to the Dyatlov Foundation, which took possession of it, the metal was part of a Soviet ballistic missile. Military tests would explain the radioactivity of recovered clothing. Yevgeny Akashuv, Ivanov's superior in the prosecutor's general office, gave an interview to a newspaper in 2013 in which he recalled finding it suspicious when he and his colleagues were instructed to test recovered items for radiation. He sent a letter to his superiors asking why radiation was relevant. In response, the deputy prosecutor general met with the team. Akashev said that the official dodged questions about the weapons testing and ordered them to tell people that the deaths were accidental. The victims' parents came to my office. Some screamed and called us fascists for hiding the truth from them, Akashev recalled. But the case was closed and not on our orders. The theory, however, is not consistent with what was found at the site. There is no evidence that other people had been there. Snow does not lie. It would have been close to impossible to erase the signs of people and equipment moving in, killing the group, and restaging the scene. Besides, why make the staging so elaborate and bizarre? Why scatter the bodies? Why scatter the bodies around the landscape, cutting off the clothing of some and dressing it in others? Build a snow den, bury 4 bodies in 10 feet of snow, light a fire, and climb a tree to break branches, leaving skin on the bark. The theory would also suggest that there was a secret weapons base in the area, or that an errant missile had exploded over it. Yet, despite the mass declassification of documents from the Soviet area and the diligent searches of the Dyatlov enthusiasts, no such evidence has emerged. The KGB theory centers on Zolotarov, the man who was foisted in the group at the last minute. A book published in Russia claims that he and 2 other skiers were KGB agents on an assignment to meet a group of CIA operatives to furnish them with deliberately misleading information. Samples of clothing contaminated by radioactive isotopes were to be offered as bait. The CIA agents discovered the deception, killed them, and staged the scene. Pass it off on the Americans.
Uh-huh.
It is certainly plausible that Zolotarov had a KGB link. His service record in the Second World War had holes and inconsistencies, and his sudden inclusion certainly seems suspicious. Still, a KGB connection, even if proved, wouldn't mean much. Many people were low-level informants at the time, and the idea that the CIA would have chosen a place like Dead Mountain for a rendezvous seems to strain credulity, and it is literally the middle of nowhere.
Right.
However, you never know. So, another class of theories consider the variety of natural disasters. An avalanche perhaps struck the tent, causing the crushing injuries to 3 of the victims and forcing the whole group to cut their way out and head to the forest for shelter. But no avalanche debris was found. A ski pole holding up the front of the tent was still standing, and the original investigation determined that the slope was too shallow to generate an avalanche, which is also why they selected the area. Besides, the injuries to the 3 victims found in the stream bed were totally incapacitating. They could never have made it there unassisted. It was more than a mile from the tent, but the tracks leading downhill showed no signs of anyone being dragged. There were 8 or 9 separate sets of footprints, so the fatal injuries must have come after everyone had left the tent. In 2013, a 2013 bestseller by the filmmaker and writer Donnie Eichar suggests that high winds passing over the mountain created infrasound vibrations below the range of human hearing, and that this included such terror that the skiers fled. Such terror. Much about the book is excellent. Eichar conducted many interviews in Russia and traveled to the Dyatlov Pass in winter, but his thesis would require all 9 people to have been so terrified of a sound they couldn't even hear that they ran to a certain death, not grabbing their coats or boots and slashing their way out, when the tent door would have made a far easier exit. Various hypotheses considered that a 1959 inquest also had been raked over. Carbon monoxide poisoning from the heater, sudden madness caused by consuming bad alcohol or hallucinogenic mushrooms that the man sites sometimes hung on trees to dry, or even the murder by the Mansi themselves, if, for instance, the party had strayed onto their sacred land. But the autopsies ruled out the first two of these, and when the original investigators interviewed the local Mansi tribe, they found them well disposed toward Russians. And believable. The Mansi had provided valuable help in the search, and they told the investigators that the area was not sacred. On the contrary, it was considered windy, barren, and worthless to them. By far, the most entertaining theory is that the party was attacked by a Yeti. Here we go.
Yep.
The final photograph found in Thibault Brignolet's camera has become famous. A dark figure advancing through the snowy forest, hunched and menacing, with no facial features. The Discovery Channel built an entire show, Russian Yeti, the Killer Lives, around the image. The skiers actually had been joking about Yetis a few hours before they died. A spoof propaganda leaflet was found in the tent. Alongside such items as reading the 21st Congress with increased birth rate among hikers was the following. Science. In recent years, there has been a heated debate about the existence of the Yeti. Latest evidence indicates that the Yeti lives in the northern Urals near Mount Orterten. Still, the photograph, though blurry, pretty clearly shows a member of the group. Similarly, the Krivoshenko, oh my gosh, I've said this word 6 times so far, right? Krivoshenko image of streaks of light, which has been used to bolster the UFO and weapons test theories, is typical of the end of a film roll. Right? Old school camera films, remember these?
Yep.
We're old enough, Chad. Let's be honest about it, right? So I do understand that, actually.
Yep.
All the Dyatlov theories share a basic assumption that the full story has not yet been told. In a place where information has been as tightly controlled as in the former Soviet Union, mistrust of official narratives is natural. And nothing in the record can explain why people would leave a tent undressed in near suicidal fashion. For decades, the families in the Dyatlov Group Memorial Foundation pressed for a new investigation. 2 years ago, elderly relatives of several victims finally succeeded in getting the case reopened, and this would have been in 2019. A young prosecutor in Yekaterinburg, Andrei Kurikov, was put in charge. In 2019, he organized a winter expedition to the site. His team took measurements, surveyed, photographed, and conducted a variety of experiments. Using photogrammetry of the pictures taken in 1959, they tried to establish the precise location of the tent. The spot they settled on was several hundred feet from a cairn, marking the previously accepted location on a steeper section of Kolas Cycle Slope, or the Death Mountain Slope. Combing through historical data, the investigators determined that the weather conditions on the mountain that night were even more extreme than they had thought. The skiers were engulfed in a storm with winds up to 65 miles an hour, which is tropical storm, right? That's pretty stiff. And temperatures around minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. As evening fell, they were probably unsure of their precise location. From the outset, Kurikov adopted an intentionally narrow scope, dismissing 72 of the 75 explanations for what may have happened. A large class of these 75 versions are conspiracy theories, alleging that the authorities were somehow involved in the incident, he said, when announcing the investigation. We have already proved that this is absolutely false. This left the investigation with 3 natural occurrences to consider: an avalanche, a hurricane, and a slab of snow sliding over the tent. Last July, Kurikov held a televised press conference in which he told his audience that the last of these was the definitive explanation. 2 photographs taken by the Dyatlov party around 5 p.m. while they pitched the tent showed that they had cut deeply into the snowpack at right angles on the slope, forming a hollow. They had picked the spot where the mountain peak offered some shelter from the strongest winds. Later in the evening, Kurikov said a snow slab detached from the slope above and buried most of the tent, pinning down the occupants and possibly causing injuries. Fearing that a full-scale avalanche was imminent, the skiers cut their way out of the downslope side of the tent and fled to a rock ridge 150 feet away, while Kurikov turned a natural avalanche limiter. But a big avalanche didn't come, and in pitch blackness, they were unable to find their way back to the tent and took shelter in the woods a mile away. Kirikov tested this theory by blindfolding a man and a woman and leading them 90 feet downhill from a tent. Asked to find their way back, they quickly went astray. I think I would too.
Yeah.
The task would have been more difficult in a blizzard and with most of the tent buried in snow. Analyzing the 1959 photographs, many Dyatlov researchers had calculated that the tent was pitched on a slope of some 15 degrees, which is not steep enough to sustain the movement of snow in cold conditions. The new position of the tent was, as determined by Kirikov's topographical experts, was therefore crucial because the gradient here was between 23 and 26 degrees, enough for avalanche formation. A paper corroborating much of Kirikov's explanation was published in January by two Swiss engineers in the journal Communications, Earth, and Environment. Creating a mathematical model of the snow structure that night, the researchers showed why the slab didn't release immediately when the group cut out into it, but only hours later. Additional loading of snow during the storm was responsible. Gain more weight.
Mm-hmm.
Here, the author reviewed the hypothesis with Ethan Green, the director of the Colorado Avalanche Information Center, who has a PhD in the physics of heat and mass transfer in snow. He suggested that the party's decision to pitch the tent in the wind shadow of the peak made it likely that they were cutting into the so-called wind slab, an accumulation of hard snow, even more dangerous than the typical snow slab. Compacted by the wind, this kind of snow is several times denser than directly deposited snow, and according to Green, can weigh as much as 670 pounds per cubic yard. Furthermore, the clear conditions preceding the storm could have led to a formation of a layer of light, feathery frost known as surface hoar, H-O-A-R. When buried in fresh snow during the storm, this layer forms a hazardous stratum that provides poor support to the snow above and often releases, resulting in avalanches. By removing the support on the lower edges of the slab while digging to set their tent, the skiers likely caused the fracture higher up. If the wind slab had simply slid over the tent and halted without developing into a full-fledged avalanche, the evidence, Green said, might be visible 25 days later. Even the fissure in the snowpack would probably have been erased by the elements. If a 3-foot slab moved over the tent, each skier's body would have been covered in more than 1,000 pounds. The massive weight prevented them from retrieving their boots or warm clothing and forcing them to cut their way out of the downslope side of the tent. The two Swiss researchers believe that the snow slab probably caused the terrible injuries to 3 of the skiers found in the snow den, but this remains unlikely given the distance of those bodies from the tent. This is 1.5 miles. Kirikov's explanation is more ingenious. The 9 skiers retreated downhill, taking shelter under the cedar tree and building a fire. Because the young trees nearby were icy and wet, someone climbed the cedar to break the branches higher up, hence the skin and scraps of clothing found on the trunk. The fire they built in these extreme conditions was not enough to save them, however. The 2 most poorly dressed in the group died first. The burned skin on their bodies came from their desperate efforts to seek warmth from the fire. This would suggest that the piece of flesh Kravchenko bit from his finger was probably a result of the delirium that overtakes someone who's dying of hypothermia, or perhaps from an attempt to test for the sensation of a frostbitten hand. The surviving skiers cut the clothes off their dead comrades and dressed themselves in the remnants. At some point, the group split up. 3 skiers, including Dyatlov, tried to return to the tent and soon froze to death as they struggled uphill. The other 4, who were better dressed, decided to build a snow den to shelter in overnight. They needed deep snow, which they found in the ravine a couple of hundred feet away. Unfortunately, the spot they picked lay above a stream, a tributary to the Lazva River. The stream, which never freezes, had hollowed out a deep icy tunnel, and the group's digging caused the roof to collapse, throwing them into the rocky stream bed and burying them in 10 to 15 feet of snow. The pressure of tons of snow forcing them against the rocks, caused the traumatic injuries found in this group. The gruesome facial damage, the missing tongue, eyes, and lip probably resulted from scavenging by small animals and from decomposition. Kirikov's reconstruction of events made a single plausible narrative out of her previously mystifying anomalies. But what of the radiation? This detail, the most enigmatic, oh my gosh, English once again. But I swear I've been speaking all my life. The most enigmatic of all might have been the easiest to explain. For one thing, the mantles used in camp lanterns at the time contained small amounts of radio element thorium at Thorum. Even more pertinent, the expedition took place less than 2 years after the world's third worst nuclear incident after Chernobyl and Fukushima, which occurred at the Mayak nuclear complex south of Sverdlovsk on their way up, and happened in September of 1957. A tank of radioactive waste exploded, and the radioactive plume, some 200 miles long, later named the East Urals radioactive trace, spread northward. Kurashenko had worked at the facility and helped with the cleanup. Another skier came from the village in the contaminated zone. So they likely had some radiation already on them.
Right.
Kirikov closed his press conference by declaring formally, "This is it. The case is closed." Given how frightened the case is in Russia, this was too optimistic. For many people, nature alone cannot explain a tragedy of this magnitude. Perpetrators must be identified and the state and its dark past invoked. Sure enough, the conclusions were greeted with scorn, especially by the families of the dead. The Dyatlov Group Memorial Foundation sent a letter to the Prosecutor General declaring that, in its view, the skiers' deaths were caused by the atmospheric release of a powerful toxic substance when a secret weapons test went wrong. Natalia Varsanova, a Moscow journalist who has covered the subject for many years, also rejected Kurikov's conclusions. 2 years ago, I thought that the prosecutor, Andrei Kurikov, really wanted to know the truth, she wrote to me in an email. But now I doubt it. I don't believe in an avalanche. After all the Swiss reports came out, she published an article rejecting it as well. These theoreticians' conclusions are supported by mathematical calculations, formulas, and diagrams. But the local Mansi, numerous tourists, and organizers of snowmobile tours who have never seen avalanches on this slope, they are unlikely to agree with them. So basically, she's saying the nerds are wrong, right?
Right.
And it is a formula. So I can understand that. A month after the press conference, Kurikov was reprimanded for holding it without authorization. And in October, he was removed from his post. The prosecutor's office has claimed that he resigned, and he did not respond to requests for an interview. So he didn't resign. Earlier this year, he was appointed a deputy minister of natural resources in the Sverdlovsk region, which is a major timber producer. As Kunsevich wrote to me sarcastically, Kurikov was shunted off to felling trees. Meanwhile, the prosecutor general declined to be interviewed for this article, and his office has issued no official report. Kunsevich believes that a report may never be released, even to the families. The foundation is now calling for yet another investigation. Any clarity that Kurikov's solution might have brought was quickly occluded amid an atmosphere of murk and mistrust. The most appealing aspect of Kurikov's scenario is that Dylatov's party's actions no longer seemed irrational. The snow slab, according to Green, would probably have made loud cracks and rumbles as it fell across the tent, making an avalanche seem imminent. Kurikov noted that although the skiers made an error in the placement of their tent, anything they did subsequently was textbook. They conducted an emergency evacuation to ground that would have been safe from an avalanche. They took shelter in the woods. They started a fire. They dug a snow cave. That had they been less experienced, they might have remained near the tent, dug it out, and survived. But avalanches are by far the biggest risk in the mountains in winter, and the more experience you have, the more you fear them. The skiers' expertise doomed them. At the end of 1958, as the date of departure approached, Kurashevchenko wrote a letter to Dyatlov firming up various logistical matters, and he enclosed a poem addressing New Year's greetings to the entire group. Here it is. Here's wishing you, camps pitched on mountains far, routes to hike over ranges untamed, packs that, as ever, rest lightly on your backs, and weather that smiles upon your quest, and let your footprints trace winding tracks across the map of Russia. Today, the Dyatlov Pass is a popular hiking and tourist destination. Hundreds have visited Height 1079 and followed Dyatlov's route on foot, snowmobile, or skis. People come from all over the world to see the place where the tent once stood, the stream bed where bodies were found, and the cedar tree, its broken branches still visible. Others come to take measurements, photographs, and videos to support their pet theories. The windswept heights of Dead Mountain have come as a site of pilgrimage. Long after their deaths, Dyatlov and his friends did indeed leave their footprints across the map of Russia. Here it is.
Wow.
So, this is crazy, right? Like, there's so much stuff here. And it is absolutely, what I was not, you were not alive. I was not alive. I was joking earlier, of course,
Right.
but this is what I would expect after something happened in Soviet Russia, to how what I'll call cover up would have happened. It's just so, and misinformation, disinformation, no information, at all. How all of this went down is still a mystery. I mean, this group they had such stuff in front of them. Everything was in front of them. Like, they're 20 something years old. They are on a journey of a lifetime. This has that feel, like, that between high school and college, going backpacking across Europe, the dream stuff that people do, this had that,
Right.
that was their trek. It was getting these 250 or 350 miles, I'm sorry, getting to the end destination and being able to claim they did it, and
Right.
it would always be theirs to say.
Right. Now, I've also heard that they were earning levels of their wilderness,
Yes,
hiking, whatever. And
Yep.
this was actually part of their leveling up to the next thing, because they were all skilled winter survivalists, and this was a test, and the fact that they couldn't survive was just mind-boggling.
What you speak of, there are 3 levels 1, 2, and 3 of an outdoor survival certification, and all of the individuals on this trip were level 2, except for the individual who was the former military. He was already a level 3, but he was also a good bit older and had served, military in World War II. So likely his experience and his certification came from his military time.
Right.
So and you're right, it would have leveled them up, to their 3rd level, which is the highest achievement, unless somewhere along the way some other levels got added. Jim's got a great. This story has spooked me for a long time. Please never pick Russia for a road trip.
Well, Todd wants to go on
Todd
a road.
wants to go. I mean, here we go. Right, I'll go. It's cool, but I'm going in the summertime.
Jamie, it's not cool. It's cold.
It's cold.
I did calculate.
I'm going in the summertime. I'm good with it. Look, I lived in the Rockies for a while, and I'll tell you, even here in the U.S., there are places there that are far enough away, and the weather changes so quickly that you can get stuck. And without the right equipment, without the right vehicle, even, or the right resources, you could be somewhere for a while. And there's a reason there's all of these survival shows, where the guy's driving on a closed road, and then the car runs out of gas, and he's got he self cameras himself for 2 days to get out of that area, and all the stuff he rips out of his car and all the things. It is dangerous. And this trip was not a joke. I mean, this was not a fun trip in the sense that it was just joyriding around. They were prepared. They had all of the equipment they needed. That tent was a 10-man tent. It was not small. It was not they were not pitching pup tents, and huddling around each other. This thing was, you could stand up in it. You had a stove.
It was like a military tent.
It is a full military tent, right? And this is a good time to bring in David Deramidi's comment of having being a large pole in the tent. This tent definitely had a large pole. You could stand up in it.
I'm sort of imagining things like the like in MASH, the tents that you would have seen. Yeah.
Yes. So, absolutely.
So I did some quick calculations while you were finishing the story. You said it was negative 35 degrees.
Yes.
With 60-degree or 65 mile per hour winds.
Yeah.
That would be a wind chill of 110 below zero.
No.
That's cold.
Not doing that. No.
Yeah. So
no. I complain when it gets to be like 30 above.
Yeah.
I am not a cold weather person. This is not me. No.
So we're not here to complain about the weather there, Jamie.
We're commenting on it, though. We can comment. So all of this is so fantastical, though, because there is, there are cameras that, there's imagery that they took. There are journals that they kept. All of this stuff leads to this fateful evening when all hell breaks loose and stuff just goes south. It goes sideways really fast. And what amazes me, and it's not really commented on anywhere in this particular article, but there are about 20 days between when the incident is believed to occur based on the journals that were kept and so forth to the February 20th date and 25th even, when between the time the searchers arrived and actually found people, there were still visible tracks in the snow in the middle of the mountains in the middle of winter. It's hard for me to believe that 3 weeks went by when there wasn't any significant snowfall on a very snowy area that would have covered these tracks up, or at least most of it. And the tent was already covered in snow, likely because snow came down the mountain. But the rest of the tracks, they're still, like, they're seeing toe prints in the snow. That's a very well preserved piece of information and evidence. Right. So
I mean, and part of that has to do with how cold it is, but you're right, not having snow come down on top of it, like it's
hard to believe there was no accumulation that would have started to cover this stuff up, at least.
But I mean, you never know, because if they did get a really bad storm, sometimes then it's, that storm goes through and then there's calm for days afterward. It's hard to say.
That's fair. I mean, we've all been through that here. I mean, it's just colder right there, but
and the cold helps preserve that, because the snow's not melting, so you do have those impressions.
Absolutely.
But
things to think about, right? So
yeah, what keeps sticking in my mind is I think it's 4 bodies in that snow cave, but 3 of them were lined up. Like that's what boggles my mind the most. Like, there's something that bothers me about that, but it could be, like you said, they were just crushed by the weight of that snow when it collapsed because of the stream.
So there's a lot of density in snowpack, and that's the reason that avalanches, because the snow's fluffy and light and fun, right? But when avalanches strike, I mean, it's got mass and it's got acceleration, and the idea that the wounds, were consistent with an automobile accident, would apply to that situation. Right. If given, they were at the peak of the impact, they were there when it hit,
and not having external physical damage sort of goes with that as well.
Right. Yeah. And the one thing that's not really considered here, at least not in the sense of this article, is that, given this is a traumatic event, right? And it's a quick change type of situation, like normalcy to crisis.
Right.
Adrenaline kicks in, the fight or flight kicks in. And, that certainly could have been what helped get those injured people away, on their own power. They were just, and you're following someone too, like there's a lead, someone's taken off and you're going with them. That's the flight part of it. Things just kick in, the psyche kicks on. And we're going to, in 2 weeks, next time I host, we're going to talk about the third man syndrome. And some of that's going to come back into it. So I'm kind of setting this as a 2-part maybe thing, but I'll not give too deep there, but to give too much away. But the idea that, there sometimes is just an exponential guiding hand helping you get somewhere through a crisis too. Could be a factor here, but I don't know. I mean, obviously we weren't there, but with so much theory, and it is all theory because no one who was there is alive. There's always someone to pitch in an opinion. But there was so much of it that kind of makes sense. And unfortunately, a lot of it makes sense, and they're all different, and the one thing I'm not going to buy, but I want to buy, is the Yeti. That'd be great. It'd be cool. I mean, not cool for them, but if it were, it's like, and the picture that's commented about is clearly a dude, wearing a snowsuit, just at a distance, so it's not a Yeti, or it's actually black, his gear, instead of the presumed, snow shape or snow coloring or lighter color. But the idea that the military could get involved in this certainly is plausible. The Mayak explosion at the time was the worst nuclear accident in the world in 1959, and the Western world did not find out about this until after Chernobyl, which was in 1989, something like that. Yeah. So it was like the 90s till the West found out about this crazy accident that was devastating. And possibly, you can go back to the Mansi tribe, with respect to, they were the ones, the indigenous people who lived in this area, who were highly impacted by that accident. Their peoples were in this land, and this spread up to the Arctic Circle. as far as the plume. So it was a vast territory that left a lot of people significantly altered. The birth rates dropped. The fact that kids were being born with deformities accelerated who were being born. So there's a lot of things that the people there could have been mad about, and taking it out on someone possibly. I don't know. I'm not. That's a conspiracy theory. I'm not trying to posit like, hey, this is what it is, but I can certainly see that. These are trespassers.
So Todd Carmel,
right? Aliens at the end of it. So why not? Let's just throw it all in the mix. It's like a big blender. Let's just throw it all in, mix it up, see what comes out. It's going to taste good. So.
Speaking of taste, Todd and Carmel, their question is, one of the hikers' tongues was missing. That's a tad strange. Now, that's been accounted for by small rodents, things like that. That would be burned snowpack.
It could very well be the same with the eyes being missing. And eyelids. Scavengers would have picked through. And it could be birds for that matter. It doesn't have to be a marsupial. Marsupial. That's not the right word. Right. What word am I looking for? Mammal.
Marsupials are a different climate.
Totally different thing. Yeah, they hop around a lot.
And it will depend too on how the person passed away. Like if the other two, like the three were lined up, like it almost feels like they were being taken care of by this fourth person. So if the fourth person passed away and their mouth was open, that would be very easy then to explain that. But who knows? Like none of us were there. Like this is one of those that you can conject as much as you want, but I don't think you'll ever get the right answer. So
Bert. So I'm surprised you don't have popcorn for these episodes, actually. So you got to eat something. Popcorn.
Who's saying that Bert doesn't?
Just gonna let that one slide. Thanks for indulging me. And that article was really long, and I apologize for the length of it, but it just shows how much there is to this. That is, there. And once again, when you're stepping back, you're trying to step back in time, and forensics has done so much through the years, but it still isn't enough to settle this.
Right.
And you're right. You said it very well, Chad. We weren't there. We don't know. And I'm sorry. I'm reacting to Heather's comment of ice cream. Yeah, that's.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Bert was saying he meant the last survivor had to eat something.
Okay, that makes more sense. Well, sure. You think about the Donner Party, right? That's one of the tragic experiences here in the Old West. Settlers heading out to California, they got stuck in the snow snowbound over the winter, and eventually led to cannibalism. The story of the Peruvian, I believe, a soccer team whose plane crashed in the Andes, going from match to home. That was inspired the movie Alive from back in the 90s, a really good movie, actually. That the need to survive kicks in, and the disdain for the idea of consuming another person, it gets less and less the more you need to survive. And unfortunately that person's already passed. So it's not like we're cannibals, catching people and throwing them in big pots on the fire. These were dire situations.
It's survival instinct.
It is absolutely that. And there isn't really any evidence of this happening with these folks, which really leads me to believe that it all happened really quickly, and hopefully so for the grace of their passing, that it didn't have to suffer, at least not for long. So that, because there's the idea of starvation is a long process. It takes a while.
Well, I with negative 35 degree temperatures, I don't think.
Yeah, well,
I don't think they would have survived very long at all, especially knowing how they were dressed. Like they were that startled, and that just blows my mind.
Yes, absolutely. And it's to me, it's the fight or flight moment. They decided to flight. They ran for it, and I think I probably would have too, as best I could.
Right.
This old guy don't run no more. So.
Well, but again, the other interesting point is if they had not been so experienced, they might have survived.
That's true. Well, training is everything, right? I mean, that's really the point of it. That's why you have the certifications and you work to get to the level, so you are prepared. And unfortunately, the textbook isn't always, this is, I'm going to get geeky for a second, but this is Captain Kirk, right? In the Kobayashi Maru, you know, the test, the true test of stress for a captain, and he rewrites the program to cheat it. You know, the idea is that mindset, everybody else took the test straight on and failed miserably because you're supposed to. You know,
Right.
the idea here is that they followed the practice that they were trained and taught to do and failed them. So if somebody would have went off book or off script and done something uniquely different, perhaps that person would have survived, or the rest would have as well. I don't know. We'll never know. And here we are speculating still again. And here we are 65 years later, still speculating about this.
Jamie, unless we can time travel.
Time travel would be great.
So
right. Well, Todd, work on this for us, okay? we here at Paranormal Lens approve that message and commission you without any money, of course, because we have none. But build that time machine, and we are in, buddy. And that's going to save us a lot of time on our road trips too, right? So
yeah,
you just hop to places, easy.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate everybody indulging me on this one. I've been aware of this for a very long time, and I the more I read, mm-hmm. Which I've been working on this episode probably for 2 months with the start process to now, and it's still going. Here we are still talking about it, an hour later. We could probably go another hour. A lot of it would probably be rambling by then, but it's just that thing. You can just keep going. Mm-hmm. And it still is. And it's really cool to me that there is a monument. You saw that, erected near the cedar tree, that this area is an active spot for recreational and, enjoyment kind of use. It's not a dark and dreary place where people aren't allowed to go. It's, and even, the recovery from the Mayak nuclear disaster is really cool. That the Earth is resilient, and they've come back. And Chernobyl still is not accessible. It's still a dead zone, and it's still cordoned off that people can. You have to go with equipment. You can't just walk through it.
Right.
Fukushima is still cordoned off, and you can't get to the area. So this hopefully is we've learned, right? But we're still we're still at the mercy of accidents happening, and that's really scary, and we are, where I sit today, I am about 5 miles south of 3 Mile Island here in Pennsylvania. And, back in 1979, the plant, the reactor started to melt down, and luckily it didn't go full scale, or else we wouldn't be sitting here talking, this about it. But that plant was a highly technologically advanced in its time and very productive facility that gave power to this whole region that we are in. And it took a bad day to shut it all down, and it has not been running since 79. So, 40 something years later. My math is terrible. Sorry. But, we build these things to make our lives better and more efficient and safer. But yet, they can be the end of a lot of things. Yep. So, but I digress.
Right.
All right. So, you want to move on?
Yeah. But Jamie, thank you for doing the research on that. Everybody appreciated it. It is one hell of a story. I mean,
it really is. Thank you. And you're right. That's a great way to say it. It's a hell of a story. And the problem is, it's not a story. It is a story, but it's not a story in a sense it's fantastical. It's true. It's real.
Right. It's not fictional. It's real life.
It's not a work of fiction, and that's amazing. Like, sometimes truth, life is stranger than fiction. Mm-hmm. Here it is.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so we can move on. Next week, a couple weeks ago.
I'm so glad you get to read this one for once.
What's that?
I'm glad you get to read this next one.
So next week, a couple weeks ago, as I was saying, we were in Ireland. Next week, we're going to go to the Scottish coast for the Lost Lighthouse Keepers of I worked in this. It's actually Eilean Mor. So I cannot do it with a Scottish accent, but it's Eilean Mor. So And actually, this is another interesting story that's not a fantastical story. I've been digging into it. It is also mind-boggling.
Cool.
Probably not quite as mind-boggling, but it's interesting. There's a lot of aspects to it. Week after that, as you alluded to earlier, you're going to jump into the Third Man Syndrome. Then we'll do Wilson Castle, Well of Barhout. And then the 22nd, right after our investigation, our spooktacular, which we'll get to in a minute, we will have Daryl Marston on talking about the investigation at Booby's Brewery.
Yep. It's going to be fun.
Yep. Looking forward to that. You want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, speaking of special events and Daryl, so October 19th at Booby's Brewery in Mountjoy, PA, is our spooktacular event. This is our Halloween party event. We're going to have Daryl Marston and Ron Iacovetti and Lourdes Gonzalez with the Staticom Project join us that night as investigators, and to have a public investigation of Booby's Brewery. Now, this is something we do, every month as is, but with special guests and spooky season. This is going to be a special night. We will have a roundtable discussion with all of them in advance of it, photos and all that good stuff, lots of questions. Everybody who's coming, Daryl and Ron and Lourdes, are all so personable and so genuine.
Yeah.
Genuine people, and, I think of Daryl being a television personality. That's the first time I saw him. But as I've met him several times along the way these last couple of years, he is, in person, is every bit a normal dude, and just super nice. And he is just genuine, and I love that. And Ron and Lourdes are every second of that as well. Just really cool people, passionate for the field, as I think we all are. We wouldn't be doing this stuff if we weren't. We wouldn't be listening if you weren't, very highly interested, at least in the field. And most of us have been out somewhere, doing investigations. So, just the expertise that's going to be in the room at night, just with these three folks, is going to be off the charts. So, I'm highly excited, looking forward to it. It's still a couple weeks out. So I believe I looked earlier today. I believe there are still 12 tickets available. So
that's what I have.
Okay, there it is. Oh, look at you. Yeah. Cool. We had the same line on that one. As we are getting there to the date is going to get less and less available. So if you're thinking about coming, don't wait. Plan ahead. There are accommodations available at the brewery on the hotel level on the third floor, but also across the street in Malt Baron's Mansion. All of the information on how to get that settled is on the boobiesbrewery.com website under accommodations at the top tab. So, and then lots of stuff around the area. I thought about this the other day, Chad, and it is spooky season. So there are here in Lancaster County in Pennsylvania, the two of the largest, most popular Halloween attractions are under our in our purview here in an event, a place called Jason's Woods, and also Field of Screams. So my theory for you all, if you're coming, come on Friday, check in wherever you're staying, and go to one of these events and have a scare. And then come to the brewery on Saturday night, have dinner first at the brewery, great food, great atmosphere. And then we'll dig into a real public paranormal investigation with all of these great folks, and head home on Sunday and tell your friends, and then it'll be a cool event. So it's a weekend. Plan it out. There's lots of stuff to do here in Lancaster County. Fantastic place. So I'd love to have you. Okay. So the other events, though, we still do public events too on top of the spooktacular event. So the 28th in 2 weeks, we're going to have a public event at the brewery. Tickets are still available there. They are starting to go as well. On October 12th, we'll have another, and then two more to finish out the year on November 16th and December 7th, and then we will be done until we get into January. Which those dates are coming. This is like last year. We just need to get them approved and validated. So as soon as we get them, we'll post them and continue the link here. But all the opportunities for tickets for all the events are available at boobiesbrewery.com. And everything else about the brewery is there as well. So really cool place.
Yep. Follow up on last week's episode. Selma Mansion's Psychic Fair is this coming Saturday. So if you want to support them, that's a good way to go support them. Go visit the vendors, the it'll be a great event. So check that out. Give the opportunity to do some fundraising for them. So
yep, absolutely, and they are fantastic folks. The really cool place as well.
So, and then here's our social stuff. Find us on Facebook or YouTube. You found us.
You might have found us already, so I don't know if you're here on the live event. It's either Facebook or YouTube. But keep in mind tomorrow and or later today. I don't know what time it is for y'all, but our streaming option will be available where we upload this episode, and we've been uploading steadily. We talk about it all the time, but this is season 2 of so season 1 is slowly being updated to the usual stuff like Spotify and Audible and Apple and iHeart, and I'm probably forgetting 5 of them, but all the usual streaming services. There's so many anymore, right? So you can find us there, and if you're interested, you can obviously go back and listen again and again and again as much times as you like.
And if there's one that you'd like that we're not on, let me know, and I will get it there. So.
It's true. Drop us a comment. We'd certainly, and you can email us because Paranormal Lens Podcast at gmail.com. It is all spelled out, Paranormal Lens Podcast. Sorry, but Gmail is pretty easy to spell. But in that, we're always looking. We have topics. You saw that on our upcoming episodes. But if there's something that you're interested in, or something that you experience, and you'd like us to share it on air and do an episode on it, we're happy to. We've done it a lot, and we're going to continue to do so as stuff comes. We're never going to run out of stuff. I said this last night, and I really mean it when we were on the EVPE podcast, that the paranormal field has no walls. There is so much, between investigations, between physical locations, between phenomena, between cryptids, between experimental stuff, ITC. There is so much stuff that we will never, likely ever, run out of topics. So, but that doesn't mean that if you're not seeing what interests you, that we won't cover it. It might be on our list, but it's just further down. So, and I know we've probably got stuff lined up in the next year, right, Chad?
I'm just looking at we're pretty much lined up through the end of the year. We just had to figure out what's going on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve or Tuesday nights. So do we dare do stuff on those evenings and risk being on the couch for a month or worse? This is what we want up in a Dyatlov Pass. So I don't know. We'll talk. Yeah.
More. So, we'll certainly have a plan.
But yes, we're scheduled through the end of the year. But now we want to get Ron and Lourdes back in here. We want to get Tony and Cherie back in here. Like we'll move things around to make things work. So
we always make it work. So and Jim just put in the best icon ever, Santa Claus.
Yep.
So, yeah. It's coming, Jim. It's coming.
So. Jim, I'm going to send you a message because I know somebody who's looking for a Santa Claus. So
speaking of the that's a great opportunity. Thanks, Chad. I almost forgot myself. So, okay. Final thoughts, sir?
Again, great job on finding the article that gave us all the information.
I found all of that separately elsewhere, and honestly, I was trying to build it all together, and I thought, man, this is perfect. Like it really covers it. And thank you again for indulging me. Thanks for having me. And I apologize for anybody who's Russian for butchering last names. I certainly don't mean to. As we did an episode before, I Americanized it or Americaned it up. I tried, and there's some challenges there. So it's me. Yep. But yeah, and well, I'm looking forward to next week's episode too. So I think it's cool. We have some engagement, some long stories as well once in a while. So
right. So
cool.
Okay. Well, on that note,
while we're speaking of next week, we have a visitor.
Okay.
So, who's been patiently waiting to say hello to everybody. Everybody remember Emmy? The superstition episode that we did about a year ago just dropped this week onto all the streamers, and Em was a guest covering theater superstitions. So I'm very proud of you for that. It was a great job, by the way.
Yep.
So we'll have you back.
So, and you know what dropped today, Jamie?
Yes, I do.
The Halloween episode.
It did. Absolutely did. And so, we all have jobs, right? And therefore we have some responsibilities during the daytime. But one of the perks of mine is that I get to have stuff, on my phone playing. Usually it's music, but in the case of episodes, I want to rewatch these too because it's been a year, and it came on and I just started laughing at our experience. We did a bit of a live thing that was recorded, but we went out to the field and to the Hansgraf Cemetery. So if you need a laugh at our expense, please watch that episode. We had no idea what we were doing. First time in the field, first time outside of us, us in a place where we could sit and be climate controlled. And even though we're live, we still have a plan here. We did not really have a plan out there.
No,
so,
played that one by ear.
We really did, and it turned out well. I think. Well, we survived, which is the most important part. With the urban legend that's associated to it, which we do cover, of course. So I'm not going to give it away, but we made it. So and we made it this far. So I guess we're good, right?
I think so.
Hope. Are we keeping up? All I can see is your mouth at the screen with the biggest yawn ever.
Well, Jamie, thank you again. Thank everybody who was watching and who's going to watch online later or listen on the podcast. We couldn't do it without you. So
and if you are catching us later, please leave a review. Leave us, comments, something. Say, hey, this is great, or hey, you guys suck. We'll take it, whatever it is. We'd love to have a 5-star review. It helps us know what we're doing, but any stars would be great for us. Feedback is important. Let us know how we're doing. And, we're always striving to improve and do better. So, without feedback, it's really hard. It's just assumptive. So we appreciate you. And thanks to everybody, regardless of how you found us and where you're watching or listening to us. Thank you so very much. Your engagement makes us all that much more fun. We would probably still talk to each other about stuff, but to be able to share it with you all, it's special. And we really appreciate you.
So, all right.
Until next week.
Good night. See you next Tuesday.